Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elbarini Sim from the Singapore Global Network, together with the Singapore Economic Development Board and SG Innovate. Thank you so much for joining us on yesterday and today's jam-packed programs of content. So thank you once again for joining us for Minting Good, a special two-day event yesterday and today on new technologies brought to you by Singapore. So as you can see, my screen's on the left. These are NFTs from 12 UK and Singapore-based artists. So 100% of the proceeds will go to the artists and two charities that support disadvantaged artists. Now, we hope that you will take the time after the session to check out the works. And if you would like to purchase a piece, please approach my colleagues from Byte Hall team, which will be on hand to assist. Yes, the lady, you'd like to just give a wave? Great. So. This is our second last or third last session for today. We are so excited to have all of you here today, and do join us for the rest of the day as well. And for this session, we are very pleased to have Arnold Blondin, if I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, yes, who is the founder of Pufferfish Partners, who is actually going to be moderating the next session on DeepTech in Asia and Europe. Arnold, please.
Oh, excellent.
For you, then. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot, actually, for attending our session. Apologies in advance because you'll have to deal with half an hour of French accent. I'm Arnaud. I'm the founder of Pufferfish Partners, a company that specializes in bringing European deep tech companies in Asia. And I'm very glad to be assisted in this panel with by Christophe. You want to say a few words about yourself, Christophe?
Yeah, a few words for a long career with a French accent as well, so I will be short. I have more than 30 years of experience. I spent half of my career at Microsoft. I was the head for Microsoft in South Asia, in Singapore, long time ago. And then I was the head for Microsoft France, a couple of listed companies, and I moved back to Singapore from 2013 to 2018, where I started to do investment in VC and private equity. And now I'm in Paris doing being operating partner for Apax partner in France, as well as having a portfolio of investment in deep tech startups.
Oh, excellent. So before we start in discussion, I want to give you some background about what we call deep tech. I've been fortunate enough to live in Singapore 10 years. Pufferfish has been operating for now more than 8 years, and we've been creating dozens of jobs, actually, mostly in very deep B2B technology companies. So we have quite some experience, I wouldn't claim expertise, but of bringing companies from outside the world. And we see deep tech really as a way to build a bridge, and this is the topic of today. So quickly about Singapore, as you know, let's start by reminding everyone that Singapore is the perfect gateway for engaging the wider Asia-Pacific region. And before we go into the technical discussion, let's remind ourselves what deep tech is all about. So what we call deep tech, what is generally accepted as a definition of deep tech, is deep tech starts with an invention. Deep tech, usually it's coming from a scientific discovery. The founders of deep tech companies tend to be older, and it takes time before they find their product market fit. So another way to look at deep tech companies, it's very risky companies, so high risk, high rewards, that have risk both on the technological axis and the product market fit axis. That being said, it's quite interesting to see that we are seeing a rise in deep tech investment. More and more funding is coming to deep tech. Some may argue that actually the entire VC world has been spawned by deep technology. Actually, if you go back to the early years in Silicon Valley, where actually VC were created to fund technology that were not funded by banks at the time. And Singapore is a fantastic playground, actually, to find use cases, because this is what is interesting deep tech companies. Before finding customers or investors, is finding use cases so that they can deploy their technology. So you have a lot of Fortune 500, a lot of MNCs in Singapore. There's a fantastic research environment and a lot of a great ecosystem to help you find those use cases. And what is even better is if you find use cases in Singapore and start scaling in Singapore, you also have access to a wide network of investment in the region, private equity and VC. But obviously, you know, we always recommend when we look to Asia, and this is the topic that we are going to do today, is to find the right partners. You know, find the right partners and think about this word partner, because that's the best way you're going to create this multicultural bridge. So now that we've set up somehow the scene of what deep tech is all about, I've given a very academic definition of deep tech. And I was wondering, Christophe, you as an operating partner on the other side of the table, what do you see as the main characteristics of deep tech companies?
Nothing much to add. That probably, you know, generates, as deep tech means, very technical. So probably we can see a lot of, I've seen personally a lot of deep tech startup emerging from research center or very high-end research labs. So the question is how can you move from having that technology with its unique capabilities into a product, and how can you find the market fit? And also, so the market fit is something which is important. So very often we tend to push the founders to find a marketing partner inside the marketing, co-founder or associate in the company, just to drive that journey of moving from a unique brick of technology to something that has a real product market fit. And the other thing which is very important is to find a good partner in terms of VC who can help on the long run, because most of those deep tech technology takes time to find their market fit. There might be some pivot along the way, and you need to have a partner that can be in the long term with you. That's something which is very, very, very important.
Yeah, actually, it's quite true. And I forgot to ask, actually, in the audience, how many of you are working in deep tech or think you're working in deep tech? Some of you, okay. So it's quite interesting, because based on what Christophe was saying, I kind of agree. Yeah, you're right. Deep tech, we see that it's most of the time some technical prowess, and the reality is it takes time to find the product market fit, or let's say the customer value proposition, right?
Yeah, and one of the obstacles that we have sometimes is we tend to find a large customer, and we start to do what the so-called proof of concept, and we have to be very careful with that. Generally, I talk about, we call that POC in France, but I say it's agony by POC, meaning that the end customer, the large customer, might tend to just turn your deep technology into something that fits only its needs. And so it's very important to find also on the customer side a partner who agrees that you are building a product and not just doing a project. And having that mindset is not something that's much easy as well, and requires some marketing skill as well. So that's something that startups needs to be very well aware. And the other thing is, I was mentioning that very often it's the deep tech technology is kind of a brick that has a unique capabilities, and I can take an example. I was dealing with an AI company doing facial recognition and having developed a very what they call liveness detection, to make sure that the person who is in front is really alive, and not just a photo or video that you look at. So this brick of technology is just fantastic. The question is, and all customers would agree that they need it, but is how do you go to market? And that's a key problem for deep tech, because very often you are not selling a wall, you are selling a brick which is absolutely critical. So it's a piece of software, but you cannot sell it as is. You need to sell it as an end-to-end project. So you start to deal with integrators. And the system integrator, they will say, okay, that's great. Oh, I like your technology, I will pitch to the customer. But when the time comes to pay for the technology, maybe the integrator will tell the customer, oh, I have a good enough technology and I will avoid. So the question for the deep tech technology is, how do you make sure there is a pull effect on the customer side? That's why the one strategy could be what I call the Intel Inside strategy. But to do that, you need to create awareness about your tech. And that awareness, it costs. So it means you need a good fund to be with you. Or you say, okay, I have a fantastic, if I take again my example of facial recognition in artificial intelligence, you say, well, this product could be these features could be very useful in KYC solution, you know your customer. So then maybe this company should just build a KYC end-to-end product just to value its own technology. And that's a pivot again, which requires a transformation project and some money. So I think this example shows that the deep tech needs either to be known, and we need to create awareness to create a pull effect on the customer side, or be integrated in something which is more end-to-end to give access to market to the startup.
Yeah, actually, so very good segue on access to markets. We're talking about a bridge between Europe and Southeast Asia. And actually, whereas most people think right away about Europe to US, so what about Southeast Asia and Singapore? What would be the similarities between the two markets and the differences that actually a deep tech company can leverage?
Yeah, having lived in Singapore for many years and dealt with a startup in Singapore and as well as with startups or companies in Europe, I think Singapore is definitely a very mature market, one of the highest GDP in the world, very open to innovation, and I think we all know that. You have also some very mature countries in Europe, but what we share is that none of our countries is big enough to be a market size that's critical enough to really launch a product and make a huge success. So we need to go abroad, and we need to be able to tackle this issue of having multiple culture, multiple languages, and this is definitely a commonality between what Singapore startup and European startup are dealing with.
Yeah, exactly, and it's same thing also. Have a live example, because what's interesting with dealing with many different markets is you need to also adapt your technology, actually, especially in the AI field, right? You need to understand what emotions is country per country. Yeah. And one of our customers actually was very agile. As they started in France, they are doing live clipping and live content editing using AI. So they use a lot NLP technologies, and the fact that they were ready for Europe, it helped them to faster conquer actually what was happening in Asia. So it's something to keep in mind as well in the way the R&D teams are being set up. You have a wide variety of use cases. And here again, I gave you an example of, and I think this is mostly what people have. Most of the examples we are talking about European companies coming to Asia. Christophe, I think you've dealt with actually a company moving from Singapore and conquering Europe, right?
No, I just want to I'll come back to that, but I think when you talk about AI or very high-level technologies such as NLP or sentiment analysis or emotional analysis, of course, you know that if you are in front of a German, French, British, Singaporean, Indian, it's very different. And I think one of the assets we have being multi-country by design, having to deal with diversity by design is something that should be seen as a plus, definitely, for the European and Singaporean startups. And I have an example. You're right. When I was living in Singapore in 2017, I invested in a company, and I was one of the first investors, and I helped them along the way, called Dathena, Dathena. And basically it was a combination of NLP, deep learning, and a lot of the top-notch AI algorithm techniques. And they were able to read the terabytes of unstructured documents that companies might have on the servers, and you just think about your own PC and you see what kind of mess it could be. And the robot was able to detect the level of confidentiality of the documents and predict what they were talking about. So this was a very good example, once again, of what I call a break of technology, which is a very nice piece of software, and which was very helpful to detect what needs to be protected, particularly when you want to move to the cloud and when you have sensitive assets to protect. And so we did all that progress up to the time that we exited to one of the worldwide leader in cybersecurity called Proofpoint, which acquired the technology and the company earlier in January this year. So it was, of course, we could have thought of building a much broader company, but we were facing that issue of not having an end-to-end product. And I think the perspective of seeing this fantastic technology being exposed to thousands of customers worldwide was very fulfilling, besides the check, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, we are mindful of the time, and we want to give you the time for Q&A. But here we try to set up the, explaining what DeepTech was all about. The key message here is, obviously, since you rely on deep expertise, technology, going from one continent to the other will require more than a sales and marketing office. It's going to create real collaboration. You need to find real projects. You need to actually care a bit about the human beings on the other side. And I can't finish the questions that I have for Christophe and opening the Q&A without talking about the particular geopolitical context that we are living through, and what if we elevate a bit ourselves and forget a bit about DeepTech, what this bridge between Asia and Europe could mean from a geopolitical standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, very quickly, I think there is something which is called the Indo-European axis that's seen as in terms of geopolitical position, particularly on the Europe side. Being in the UK, I'm not sure how they position themselves, but we can definitely think that from Europe to India to Singapore, Southeast Asia, and to Australia, New Zealand, there is, as I say, a commonality of issues, of assets, and an opportunity also to build strong partnership and maybe to balance between the two tectonic plaques that are being developed, one in China and the other one in the US. And I definitely think that from a geopolitical standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. But in terms of digital sovereignty, it can also.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks a lot, Christophe. So that was kind of an opening of giving you some food for thoughts. But the main content is now going to be delivered by you, actually. So we're opening the floor to any Q&A you may have. Christophe and myself, obviously, we're European. I say we're French. Collectively, we spend more than 20 years in Asia. We've been doing cross-border deals and working with our friends in Singapore for many, many years. So don't hesitate if you have any questions that you want us to answer. The floor is yours. Can I help you pass the mic? Don't be shy. Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I work for a DeepTech venture builder. I'm actually also looking into how can we evolve the Asian market. My question is really on the bridge on venture level. So when do you, from experience, think this bridge should be built? So is this maybe during building venture? Could there be a way of having venture building combined Singapore from the Netherlands? Or do you think really focus on one particular market and then move to the other? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'll take it from the operator point of view, someone trying to bring people in Singapore. The reality, if you bring a company that is too early, meaning that there's no traction, no market near their home base, is going to be very, very difficult. One thing that people forget about Singapore, which is great when you're there, is the world is competing in Singapore. Even if you think you have a unique opportunity, that unique opportunity may be also developed somewhere else. So it's really good to have at least some market traction around your HQ to have time when it comes to move across to another continent, because what we will need at the beginning is the founding team or executive team mind share. And it's very, very important. So that's mostly from my experience. I'm not sure what if you have a different opinion on that.
Generally, we tend, particularly if you take Europe and startup, if it's about when is the right time to move to Singapore, I think if you typically take a B2B deep tech company, we will advise generally to be at least having demonstrated the capacity of having another country and not just one before trying this move to Singapore, finding the right partners, like guys like Pufferfish or others who can help you. And one thing that I've seen a good way of moving abroad is also when you are a deep tech company having a large account. Generally, those companies are, if you take ABN AMRO or if you take Shell or whatever, to take Dutch examples, also Shell, I don't know, but they have their own data centers and they have their own decision centers. Maybe in most of them will be in Singapore, if not now, in the future, definitely. So that's also a good way when you have solutions that have worldwide capacity to move abroad with a couple of large customers before, because something which is important on the Singaporean market is to show references. It's something very important for Asian customers, although I say they are open to innovation. They also like that the solution has been proven. So being able to show real life case studies is something which is important. But that's the way I would see the first step.
And it goes also to the nature of deep tech companies, where we know, especially in Europe, there's some sort of investment crunch, right? It's really hard to finance deep tech companies, which means that the good deep tech companies, usually, they are financed by the best investor that there is in the world, which is a customer. So you find out that most of the deep tech companies that succeed, most of the time, they found a customer early on, and they do a consulting project, an RE project, with the caveat that Christophe mentioned, making sure that you find the customer who understands that you want to build a product, not a project for them. It's only when you have this reference that you can move. Another solution also that we've seen is if there is traction, real traction, you can move the entire company as well. That's another possibility as well.
I have two questions. The one question is that you have there Southeast Asia division, but you just talk about Singapore, because I'm also thinking about other countries like Vietnam and other countries, and they are not as developed as Singapore. And then the other question is that now we have relationship. We have built one partnership with a company from Singapore, and another partnership with a company in Vietnam. So what is the benefits that we can get with that kind of relationship from the government or from the elsewhere?
Well, I think, generally it's something that when people have not lived or spent time in Asia, they think Asia as I go to Asia, I talk about Asia as one market, but it's a very diverse market. Diversity in size of market. You have, if you even count China or Indonesia, you have huge countries. You have difference of maturity, GDP per habitant, very different between, of course, Singapore and, Cambodia. And, of course, in terms of maturity, in terms also of the way of the business practices. So there are three dimensions that are difficult to handle. So generally, when you move abroad, it's better, it's like when you pivot, it's always good to pivot on one axis at least. So that's why I was suggesting to move to Singapore, where you have business practices like lookalike Europe, where you can find funding and environment that you are probably more comfortable with to build the first customer references. And also learn how to approach Southeast Asia countries. If you take countries like Vietnam or Malaysia or Thailand or Philippines or what, you have to do that with partners, and you have to understand how you do that. So it means that you have to learn you will not sell direct, maybe some exception. You sell direct in Malaysia or in Vietnam. You'll have to go through a partner. So this means that your technology needs to be able to enable partners. So it has another level of maturity. That's why we are thinking about Singapore as a natural first step. And I would also add Australia, by the way, because Singapore is a great place to address Australia. Myself, I was CEO of NetGem, a company doing telecom solution, solution for TV solution for telecom operators. And we sold from Singapore a huge contract with Telstra in Australia. And that was for us a great springboard towards Asia and New Zealand.
So asking the question the other way around, so with the geographical coverage that you have in your experience, what are the center of cutting edge technology, whether academics or later on R&D, that actually you see have been kind of, you know, the source of most of the locally made innovations that have actually made a change?
Good question. It's a very good question because we can answer it with at least two pillars on my side. There's one, there's the technology element, where the we traditionally think about Singapore, obviously, about South Korea, about Taiwan, about even China to some extent. But a lot of the innovation, at least that I've seen, that baffle me the most is business model innovations. And here I'm thinking about companies that grew from Malaysia and Indonesia that were somehow coming out of nowhere and managed to conquer the entire Southeast Asia. Thinking about companies like Gojek or Grab that are not bringing so much of technology, but completely revolutionize the way
It's a business model
it's
innovation.
business model innovation. But yeah, technology attend by the usual suspects, right? South Korea, Taiwan, China, and Singapore. Business model-wise, around the region, for sure, yeah. Indonesia and Malaysia.
Yeah. It's a difficult question. I don't know how it has evolved, frankly, over the last years. I would say that Singapore has certainly emerged with the strong push from the government and with the universities and the top university that you have in Singapore as a place where you see a lot of innovation coming. I think in Europe it's been the same. I think you just look at the number of startups that have been created, and the ecosystem is really boiling everywhere, maybe in UK, of course, in Germany, in France, in the Nordics. And probably what has changed also a lot during the last 5 years is the fact that China itself has tried to develop its own innovation drive, which at the beginning was more look-alike from US-based software, and that I move into a brand new ecosystem that is becoming self-sufficient. That's what and that's why also when we think about moving to Asia, for many reasons, but moving to China is something that's obviously almost impossible, or very, very difficult, particularly on software.
A quick question. Just in general, are there any regulatory or kind of government-based incentives where it makes sense to develop deep tech, say, in Southeast Asia instead of, like, let's say you're trying to develop a drug and in the US is going to take 5 years and $5 billion because the FDA, or you can't really do it in Europe either, but then maybe Southeast Asia is more open to it. I don't know if you have any experience or stories around that.
So I won't be able to share numbers, but you definitely need to talk to our friends at EDB and SG Innovate who are in the room, and who would have, there's definitely incentives. The incentives are well constructed, vertical per vertical. I'm not familiar, especially on the drug part, but I'm pretty sure you can find answers on the in the room. Any last questions before we close?
Last question.
Thank you for your insightful presentation. And my question is, do you see any preference in sector specific within Singapore? Like, is any specific sector that you foresee growing and receiving more support rather than other sectors?
Well, particularly if you think about the bridging with Singapore, I would see definitely fintech as a clear leader, as well as the overall health tech. That would be the two main examples I would take as. But that said, in the B2B space, they are, I don't think there is any sector that you say you should not go abroad because the kind of needs are the same. I'm just aware of the fact that there is spatially a vibrant ecosystem around those two sectors.
Yeah, I would concur with that. It's obviously easier to enter with a B2B play rather than a B2C play. Even if you're on business to business, we do recommend also, even if most of the sectors are booming in the region, to make sure you consider the time to tailor the value of proposition, because you're not going to, you'll have to adapt at some point. Your value proposition is not going to be a one-on-one translation. You'll have to find the right partner. You have to find, maybe you'll find that actually what triggers a lot of interest is different than what you thought what it is in Europe. But definitely health tech, fintech, and more recently, projects that are linked to mobility, sustainability, constructions, definitely have an appealing at the moment. Are we good?
Okay.
Yes? Go ahead.
Since we're talking about deep tech, how do you evaluate early stage deep tech startup as compared to a regular startup? Like, is there any specific thing you look for? Since the timelines are obviously going to be very different when it comes to the payoff.
I think I take it first, and you can think about the very intelligent response. The first one I would say it's founder, because it's it's going to be a long run for deep tech. You need to be prepared that there might be obstacle on the way, and it might be a long-term play. And I think what we look when we look at startups. A startup founder is kind of a unique combination of skills. One which is to be really obsessed by his or her vision, his or her technology, and really being obsessed, being able to bang his or her head on the wall until it cracks. At the same time, be smart enough to go around the wall if this is the head that will crack. So I think this is this unique combination that we tend to look at when we think about startups. So do we have someone that will have the persistence and the agility?
No, actually, to complement what Christophe is saying, it's exactly this. It's mostly founders for different reasons. We saw that statistically, founders of deep tech startups tend to be a bit older than the traditional startup. So we look at this.
Not as us.
Not as not as old, not as old as us. Yeah, but we look at people who actually have also a great understanding of the market, because we're in for the long run. It's very risky, and you want to make sure that they really understand the market, and that it's not yet another invention, that it's not going to come to an invention. So the main problem you want to fix is really how quickly you can turn the technology into a customer value proposition. And again, it goes back to the founders, because sometimes as a fantastic scientist, it's hard for you to have someone who is telling you, you need to simplify, you need to simplify. So we look also for founders who can be coachable. Are they opening? But it's mostly founders. So it's the same kind of grid of everyone else, but there's a huge emphasis that is put on the founding team.
Simplification is key. It's very often a torture for a founder to not tell everything about his or her product, but to be crystal clear on maybe sometimes limiting the case study to something that looks limited, but much more impactful in terms of business. And sometimes it's not that often, particularly with French engineers, which I am.
Yes. Any last one? We're good? We need a coffee?
Okay, good coffee. Yes.
Thanks a lot. Thank
you.
Thank you, guys.